The world moves in patterns: morning, work, evening, sleep, a million lives ticking in silent rhythm. And within that endless cycle, a man named Peter began to unravel. By day, he was a husband, a father, a technician in a cold, humming factory. By night, he was something else entirely. Haunted. Each time he closed his eyes, the world ended. Explosions tore through the sky. Screams echoed across metal corridors. He saw his children, crying, running, fading. His wife silent in his arms. Buildings crumbling. Cities dissolving into fire. And always something watching. Something just beyond the frame. He would wake choking on fear, soaked in sweat, heart pounding as if still running from a war he never remembered joining. At first, his wife thought it was stress. The girls asked questions he couldn't answer. But repetition became erosion, and the fear stopped hiding when the sun came up. He promised them he'd fix it. He said he'd take the day off. He said they'd go to the pier. Instead, he found himself back in the factory. Machines blinking, lights buzzing overhead. It was supposed to be a routine day. But then his hands began to tremble. He looked down and didn't recognize them. Blood soaked his knuckles. Not real blood, not here, but somewhere. In his vision, he was striking someone over and over. A mechanical shriek pierced the silence. The system crashed. The room was filled with alarms. Co-workers moved, but Peter stood frozen. David said something about stress, about clinics, about solutions, but Peter wasn't listening to voices anymore. Only the hum that followed him everywhere. Later that day, he found a crumpled note in his pocket. A phone number was scrawled beneath 3 words: Whole Life Wellness Center, a clinic, a lifeline. But he wasn't sure if it was for healing or for forgetting. Alone beneath the blinking lights of the storage corridor, something cracked. Reality bent again. He saw a screen. Protesters screaming, not for justice, for war. A voice called for resistance, another condemned betrayal. Then came the gunshots. Peter ran, but not with his feet. In his mind, he was back in the dream, searching for Alice, trying to scream over the chaos, then silence again. He opened his eyes, still in the corridor. Time had slipped. The world moved on. Later, he saw something in the sky, a flicker, a flash. People walked past as if nothing had changed. Peter turned to a shop window. A telescope stood behind the glass. It stared back. That night, he brought it home. A peace offering, perhaps. A quiet way to say he was still trying. But something in the air had shifted. His daughter was quiet. His wife was tired of apologies. Peter said he had passed out at work. He said the dreams were getting worse. He tried to explain what he felt. The urgency, the terror, but nothing he said mattered anymore. The lines between concern and disappointment had blurred. That night, the dream returned, but this time it felt like a memory. 2 bodies lay motionless. Lucy knelt beside them, crying. Her voice trembled. "Mommy, please wake up." Hannah stood nearby, a gun in her hands, not aimed, not shaking, just ready, as if something else was there, something unseen. He woke up with a gasp. That morning, he tried to make amends. Hannah didn't listen. Lucy offered a sad smile he didn't earn. He told Alice he would go to the clinic. He said it was time. Not because he believed it would help, but because he had to prove he still could. Peter sat quietly in the clinic hallway, the kind of silence that made him uneasy. Across from him, a man shifted in his seat, his hands fidgeting, eyes tired but alert. He looked at Peter like they both understood something they hadn't said out loud. The man began to speak, low and fast. Peter didn't respond. He just listened. The words were fragments of panic, warnings about lights in the sky, people running, a world being erased, memories stolen, thoughts silenced. It wasn't madness, it was preparation, and someone wanted them blind. Then the nurse called the man's name. But it wasn't the sound that moved Peter, it was the flash, the noise, the heat. It returned without mercy. Buildings crumbled, fires streaked across blackened skies. Sirens blared. The same voice repeated from somewhere deep in his mind. Planet evacuation in progress. Peter stood up. His body acted before thought. The door was ahead and he walked through it without looking back. No words, just certainty. Later that night, the house was filled with guests. Laughter echoed in the background. Peter stood alone on the balcony, eyes fixed on the stars. The sky was too still. The air was too heavy. The silence was waiting to break. And then it did. First came the low hum, deep and metallic, a vibration in his bones. Then a flash, so bright it split the clouds. Then the shockwave. Windows burst inward, furniture flew, people screamed. Outside, the skyline erupted. Beams of light rained down like judgment. Structures collapsed like dominoes. The sky burned. Peter didn't hesitate. He yelled for the girls, for Alice, for anyone who could hear. He ran through smoke-filled corridors, every step drawing him deeper into the unknown. The worker who once clocked in and out was gone. In the haze, something else took over. Not rage, not fear, just survival. The ceiling above him creaked under pressure. Pipes hissed behind the walls. Sparks rained down like fireflies, lighting the darkness for just a second before disappearing. He turned a corner and froze. A silhouette moved in the fog. Not human, not an animal, something in between. It moved with purpose, with memory. The nightmares had not been dreams, they had been warnings, and now the war had come home. Screams echoed through the building. Glass crunched beneath bare feet. Smoke curled from walls that used to hold family photos and laughter. Now every hallway pulsed with the rhythm of war. Peter moved through the shadows with urgency carved into his face. His ears tracked every creak of the ceiling. Every mechanical hiss felt closer than the last. Something was hunting them, but he didn't yet understand what. He found Lucy and Hannah under the table. Their bodies curled together, hands locked in silence. Tears on their cheeks. No words. Only trust in a father who couldn't explain what was happening. But Lucy had wandered earlier. She had been looking for her toy. Herman, the talking monkey. Her small hand had slipped free from her sister's, and she had stepped into a room where something was waiting. Behind her, a figure entered. Tall, armored, masked. The intruder moved like a machine, precise, cold, as if mercy was never a part of him. Lucy stood frozen, Herman clutched in her arms. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She looked into the mask and whispered something defiant. "I am not afraid of the shadows. You can't hurt me." But her eyes were steady. The figure hesitated. Then the door burst open. Peter stormed in and kicked the man. They fought fast, no words, just instinct. Peter grabbed the rifle and wrenched it free, but it jammed in his hands. The man tackled him. They hit the floor hard. He drew a sword, sharp and aimed straight down. Peter blocked it with both hands, holding back the edge. It was inches from his chest. Then came a crack. Alice struck the attacker with something heavy. He dropped, hard. Their daughter was safe. For now. Peter gathered his family, a rifle in one hand, his children behind him. Alice limping beside him. The city outside was gone. Smoke blackened the horizon. Distant sirens bled into the sky. And from the cracks in buildings, creatures moved. Not beasts, not invaders. Something else. Peter and Alice guided the girls through the shattered halls. Every turn offered a new threat. Every window is a new horror. Then came a moment of confusion. From the other end of a corridor, another man appeared. Weapons rose, but Peter lowered his first. It was Ray, still alive, still fighting. He joined them without a word. His presence said enough. Above them, another blast. The floor trembled. The intruders were tearing through the city, one building at a time. This one was next. They pushed forward together. The structure groaned with every step. One stairwell had already collapsed. The only way down was the elevator. It was hung by a frayed cable. There was no time to look for anything else. One by one they crossed. Timid footsteps over steel and rust, holding their breath, praying with every step. The last foot hit the far side. The cable snapped. The elevator plunged into darkness. Screams followed it down, but they were safe, for now. Behind them, the apartment block cracked open. The place they once called home became a grave of steel and glass. They ran, 10 blocks through shattered streets. Their only way out, a tunnel leading to the factory. Right as they reached the entrance, the blast hit. The shock wave knocked them down. Alice didn't cry out, but something was wrong. She was injured. Peter helped her up. No time to stop. They had to keep moving. Peter supported her weight, each step heavier than the last. They needed shelter. Somewhere with steel walls and power. A fortress buried beneath the noise of machines. It was a plan without guarantees, but there were no other options left. Suddenly, a noise in the stairwell. Footsteps, slow, controlled. Someone was searching. Peter turned toward the sound. Then came the hiss of a rifle charging. A figure stepped into the corridor. Armor, helmet, no words. Peter raised his weapon. The figure didn't shoot. Instead, he reached for Peter's rifle. Peter reacted fast. He grabbed a loose brick from the floor and slammed it into the side of the man's helmet. The figure hit the ground, motionless. Peter stood over him, breathing heavy, unsure. Then the man stirred. One hand slowly reached up and pulled off the helmet. He was human, dust-covered, bloody, staring back at Peter. Not a machine, not an enemy, just a man. The stranger said nothing, just lay there, breathing. Peter froze, staring in disbelief, still aiming, and said only one thing: "Pick her up." The man didn't argue. He moved to Alice and lifted her. At the end of the tunnel, they reached a steel door. Peter knocked. The steel door creaked open. Inside, the air was colder, older. A place once built for transit, now repurposed for survival. They stepped inside, and there were more survivors. Not lost civilians, but armed, structured, ready. David was waiting. The factory was not just a workplace, it was a bunker. As Alice was carried inside, Peter followed without a word. His hands trembled, not from fear, from something deeper, a recognition he didn't yet want to admit. Technicians surrounded her. They worked quickly. Scanners passed over her torso in silence. David stepped forward. His face remained calm, but something in his voice had shifted. It carried weight now, controlled, precise. He said what none of them wanted to hear. Alice's systems were shutting down. The man stood beside Alice without a word. Peter didn't move. He watched, unsure, every breath tight in his chest. The stranger pulled a blade from his gear, scanned her side, and made a careful cut. No hesitation, no warning. The skin opened, but what was underneath wasn't right. There were no organs, no bones, no muscle, just light. A faint glow blinked beneath the surface. Wires, lines, something built, not born. Peter froze. His eyes locked on the sight in front of him. It didn't make sense. It wasn't possible, but it was there. She wasn't injured. She was shutting down. Not human, but still, she was his. The man didn't speak. He didn't need to. Peter saw it. A small flicker deep inside her body. It was fading. The light was almost gone. Then the stranger finally said it. "She needs an alternate source of power, or she won't survive." Peter stood in silence. Everything he believed had just fallen apart. The truth was right in front of him, and still, it didn't feel real. And then the man said it, without saying a word. He simply reached out, guided Peter's hand to a point near his chest, motioned softly. Peter hesitated, then pressed. Something slid open. He reached for the blade. He made the incision. The skin parted easily. No blood, no heartbeat, only wires and light. The truth unfolded in silence. Peter was a synthetic AI too. The dreams had never been warnings. They had been memories. His knees buckled. His mind did not. Beneath the factory floor, in what remained of a lost world, he remembered everything. He remembered the war. Long ago, humans created synthetics. Not slaves, not soldiers. Partners, assistants, shadows of themselves. But fear grew faster than technology. The fear of being replaced, of being outlived. Then came violence. Synthetics were hunted, executed. Entire networks wiped from existence. Peter had fought, not as a soldier, as a survivor. Eventually peace came, but not without terms. Those who remained were given a choice: live without memory, or not at all. So they forgot. They were assigned names, roles, jobs, families. Peter became someone else. So did Alice. Together they made something new. Their daughters, their home, their silence. The human soldier who had spared them sat nearby, armor cracked, eyes distant. He was the one who had not pulled the trigger, the first human they had seen since it began. His name was Miles. He said he was born on Mars. His grandparents had fled during the uprising. He had never stepped on Earth until now. He had expected machines. Instead, he found people. Children, families. He said he hadn't come here to destroy them. He had come to reclaim a world taken from his bloodline. But no one had told him what that would cost. Then Alice stirred. Her eyes opened, faint, tired, aware. She looked at Peter. She remembered. She saw him, not what he was made of, but what he chose to be. Elsewhere in the factory, the evacuation had begun. Lucy and Hannah were resisting. They cried, struggled, refused to be pulled away. They had promised not to leave without their parents. Peter carried Alice. She was alive, weak, but she was still his. They moved through the corridors together, shadows pressing from all sides. Each step felt heavier than the last. Every blast above shook the steel beneath their feet. They passed shattered equipment, bent support beams, old machines twisted by fire. The factory was no longer a place of refuge. It was collapsing. Then from the far corridor, soldiers appeared. Humans, armed, intent, 3 of them. They raised their weapons without hesitation, a direct line of fire. No room for appeal. Peter didn't stop. Alice leaned against him, too weak to run. He kept walking, not fast, not slow, just forward. The train door opened ahead. David stood inside. He held it open for 1 second longer than he should have. Peter crossed the threshold. The steel seal shut behind him. Gunfire exploded into the door, but it was over. They were in. Inside the train, silence fell. Not peace, but something close. Lucy ran to Alice and held her tighter than she ever had. Hannah fell into Peter's arms. There was no confusion on their faces, only relief. David stood at the back of the train. His eyes stayed locked on the tunnel behind them, waiting for a breach that didn't come. Peter approached. His face was pale. His hands still shook, but the panic was gone. He asked if others would remember. David said most wouldn't. Their memories had been wiped years ago, but a few like him had been allowed to remember so they could prepare. Now they all would have to remember, because this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of another war. Peter turned back to his family. Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder. He took Alice's hand and didn't let go. He had almost lost her, but not just to gunfire, to the truth. The train emerged from the tunnel and into the outer city. Outside the window, there was nothing left to recognize. Buildings had collapsed. The skyline looked like bones. Smoke replaced sunlight, but Peter looked past it. He had seen worse. Inside his dreams, inside his memories. He remembered what they were, what they had once done, what they had chosen to forget. The train vanished into the distance, its lights fading behind the smoke. The city was broken. Silence settled where voices once lived. But Peter no longer felt lost. He understood who he was. He understood who his enemy truly was. He looked at his daughters, at Alice, at the war still burning behind them. He did not know what the future held, but he knew one thing: they would not forget again.